Good afternoon, everyone. My name is McKinley Thompson. I'm the Senior Living Marketing Manager here at Dude Solutions, and I'm going to be moderating today's presentation. Just very quickly, we've had a couple people with some incorrect dial-in information. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and making sure that your phone is on mute for this presentation, that way everyone will be able to hear our presenters. That would be wonderful. We apologize about the incorrect information. I've posted in the chat in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen the correct dial-in information. We'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everyone can still hear. I'm sorry?
Hello? You should be able to. Hello?
Hi.
Yep.
All right. Everyone will just make sure their phone is muted. If you'll Welcome to Leveraging Technology to Enhance the Resident Experience. Like I said, my name's McKinley Thompson. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just a few housekeeping announcements besides the one I just covered. We're trying to mute all of the phone lines, so I apologize about that. And after our presentation, we are going to have a Q&A session, so you'll be able to ask our presenters any questions. And then this is being recorded, so if you're unable to stay for the duration or if you want to refer back to it at the end, we will provide the slides and recordings 24 hours after the conclusion of this event. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay Farwick. Many of you might know her. She's our Senior Living Client Success Manager here at Dude Solutions, and Patrick Tierney, who is our Senior Living Lead Applications Engineer. They both work with communities like yours every day, and they're going to go ahead and lead the charge on this presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thanks, McKinley. Hi, everybody. This is Lindsay. I want to go ahead and get started with the agenda here. We're going to start with our introduction and move from there into all of the topics that we have to cover related to resident experience and leveraging technology. We'll look at 6 key areas there, so a lot of good content, kind of following up on our last webinar that we did with Bass Curvell and Dale Weaver from Brethren Village. So hopefully some of you were able to attend that, and this is just a continuation of that and how to leverage that technology. Like McKinley said, we'll follow up that with a QA session too. So we'll go ahead and get started. We want to make sure that we make the connection here for you all. I know we did our previous webinar, as I mentioned a little bit ago, with Baz and Dale, and we discussed, how the facilities team impacts the resident experience in those 6 key areas. But today we're going to take that a step further. We're going to discuss how you can leverage the Works Hub or any CMMS to help your team accomplish just that.
Good deal. Well, thanks, Lindsay, and hello, everyone out there. My name is Patrick Tierney. Spoken to many of you in the past, and for those haven't, hopefully we can catch up in the future. And for my part, I work a lot with senior living communities, as Lindsay mentioned, in several different areas. But today we're going to focus in on 6 different areas where I think there's really an opportunity as we think about ways that even if you're using the Works Hub or if you're not, you can use some tools to really kind of help to affect that resident experience. So we'll kind of go back and forth with Lindsay here. I know she mentioned kind of that webinar from a few weeks past. I think there were some really valuable stories and some relatable information when it comes to maybe what tools you have in place to keep up with some of this and what some areas of opportunity might be. So, Lindsay, I know when you guys talked before, HVAC was probably one of the big topics, especially as it starts to heat up here this summer and everyone gets their share of breakdowns. So as it relates to the residents, what kinds of things did you guys talk about with, resident information or histories that you could leverage to kind of help you stay on top of that, especially with the AC type stuff?
Sure, yeah. So Dale mentioned a lot about how crucial resident preferences are, especially as it relates to HVAC, right? We have very specific preferences at what temperature they like their apartments, their homes to be at. And so not only is that important, but knowing what type of equipment is there and what work history is associated with that. That's important to know what has happened in the past and how to best service that in a timely manner. So that was a huge thing that Dale mentioned and I thought was relevant to our conversation today.
Yeah, yeah. I know that's been a huge topic, especially as people think about the equipment that they have and all these air handlers for all these units. So the question becomes, how do you take care of that so that the resident's not impacted and know that if something breaks, have we fixed this before? Is this something that Mrs. Smith has called out for 3 or 4 times in the last quarter?
Right.
There could be a bigger issue at hand, so let's start to store some of that info so we know a little more proactively when that stuff needs to get replaced.
Definitely.
So good. Well, what I can do for my part, we'll talk about some of these categories, and I can flip into the software. Some of you might be familiar with the work sub, some might not be totally familiar, but I thought it might be helpful. I can at least show from our perspective where we can house some of this information to help you with some of that these challenges. And then we'll hit on some other categories beyond HVAC. But if you're seeing your screen now, I've pulled up where we've been able to house some valuable information. So again, senior living communities have that challenge of there's individual residents that have these preferences. So when I go out to take care of this work, how can I see names, phone numbers, give them a call before we're coming out, and then store information very specific to them. And again, a lot of these folks have gotten into these communities and they have certain expectations. One of them, obviously does have working air conditioning. But I think even more to that, whatever information we can store relative to them might be as specific as, this resident likes to have it to be a certain temperature during the summer months. So I know if that's the case, I can act accordingly and have some of that information on there. And then as, say, a request comes in, I know some of you folks might have almost like maintenance secretaries or admin assistants, some not. But I think when you guys talked in the previous webinar, it was kind of like if a call came in, how can we leverage the previous history? Maybe there could be sort of a trending issue there.
Right.
And Patrick, someone would like to know if they put in a work order and it happens weekly, you're going out to adjust, how can they set that up, or can they set that up in the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can set up what would be almost scheduled maintenance or things that happen on a recurring basis. So it might be filter changes or other items. So we can set those up as one schedule. You can set it up for multiple apartments at a time or just one as you have them sort of organized. But all that can be configured and, have steps and procedures linked to those scheduled maintenance pieces. So again, we can stay on top of some of that equipment maintenance. And then in those cases, in addition to doing the regularly scheduled items, we can leverage the history. You can see kind of on that right side of, okay, this seems like this has happened before. We can actually jump into previous work orders and see, okay, when did this happen? Who actually went out and fixed it? What was the remedy at that time? So the AC went down on June 5th, and we can go back and leverage kind of what happened there as a way to be able to go through and see that history. So I think some valuable things to consider from the the air conditioning and kind of being reactive to that. And then, again, as we think about the equipment that's inside of these, being able to say, this was related to, air handler number 9, is it under warranty? Is there sort of a nagging history that seems to be creeping up? So that you can start to plan for replacement on some of these assets. So, some good food for thought there. Moving on, we'll jump back here to our slide deck, and we'll talk a little bit about something that I think impacts a lot of folks. I think, when you guys talked about kind of the refurbs and the apartment turnovers in the last call, you want to hit on some of those kind of high points of what was kind of discussed there?
Yeah, definitely. This is, I know, a hot topic for everybody, keeping census up, keeping the buildings attractive and keeping people happy, right? This goes a long way in that world. And both of our panelists had great information about this. Baz was talking about last time how, that's really at the heart of the resident is at the heart, of any renovation or remodel that they are doing, and they're very aware of that as they go through that process. Making sure that that resident's going to feel relaxed and enjoy their experience at the community, which I'm sure is a priority for everybody on this call as well. So they've been able to make great strides to move away from that more facility feel into something that is very homely, right? It's a household. It's not, it's not sterile. It doesn't feel like you are not at your home. So that was a big initiative that actually both of them have taken on, but Baz spoke about a lot. And he uses our projects feature to do a lot of that work. They both do. But Dale had a lot to also speak about related to the capital expenditures. So how can he kind of separate, his operational budget from his capital expenses? So he's found, unique ways to utilize the features that we have to track cost information and things like that to really understand where he's, where his money is being spent. Yeah. So lots of good stuff.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. I know it's, again, pretty common as we talk to communities that this is a major item. This is not just a work ticket here or there or a scheduled maintenance. It's that whole project management piece. So I think for our, some of our clients like Bass and Dale, they're already using the project management tool within the program. But for those that are not doing that, there's a tab that you'll see third across from the top there, where you can actually manage what would be several different projects. There's some, how people manage this with, 10, 15, 20 different projects going on at once is it's mind-boggling. So what we built into the software were ways that we could go through, and you could even set these up as templates, but these can be multiple work orders linked together that kind of line up in sequence. Where it makes it easier to manage these projects, and you can kind of have an organized thought process to what are the steps that we need to take and when are they going to happen. I think I remember, Lindsay, you were talking about one community's approach to kind of tracking this that might pose issues in some cases.
Yeah. Baz was used to using sticky notes.
Oh, yeah.
To keeping track of projects, right? Okay, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And there was no methodical way to what you were just referencing a minute ago, right, to keep track of all of that information. So it created chaos, right? I mean, it's much easier for everybody involved if, you're following a process similar to what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, again, this is, what we would consider just kind of inside of our basic maintenance, but a really valuable piece. And again, if this seems like it's, a bit much, you're not going to create a project every time. Again, you can leverage, if there's a certain template or way that you want to do it based on the level of care, so that you don't have to necessarily create it from scratch every time. You can set these as sort of, here's some typical steps that we would take. You can reorder them. You can remove steps. If there's residents that want like an upgrade or anything like that, I think having a way to keep that tracked and bill back can make sure that you're taking care of the resident first, but you're also not taking a bath on all the costs that are sort of linked to that. So you can leverage some of the templates. You can create your own, and then ultimately be able to see sort of a step-by-step process. And as mentioned, setting budgets for these and tracking the costs can go a long way to kind of what Dale talked about before, which when does it make sense to capitalize some of this?
Right.
When can, we have to report back and say, how many projects did we do last year and how much did that cost? So we know how to sort of plan for some of that.
Yeah, no, there's great reporting too on this. Like you can do some roll-up reporting on how much did those costs, how much were those costs, how much time was logged. There's a lot of good analysis that you can do, even on the project by project or overall summary. So for those meetings that you might be in, right, where budgets are being discussed or work that's happened is being discussed, you have a clean, easy way to showcase that data. So even going that extra mile than just tracking the information, which is a huge step also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully some folks on the line that can kind of relate to that in terms of what goes into keeping up with all those projects. Again, beyond what would be the typical one-off requests and the scheduled items. Okay, so moving on to the next little section here. One of the things that came up, I think, was landscaping that was kind of interesting. And for some of the communities that we work with, I mean, this could be, anywhere from 10 to 100 acres. You could have a huge sort of section where there's people that are maintaining your grounds, whether that's in-house or as a third party. Lindsay, what are some of the things that you guys covered as far as pros and cons, or maybe ways that the aesthetics could be kept up with that the resident had a positive experience?
Sure. One of the things that we really talked about a lot was outsourcing versus in-house work, right? And making that determination to move your workforce in-house. And Dale had a great example of that kind of goes along with the safety and risk mitigation side of it. He's located up in Pennsylvania, and so, of course, due to his locale, there's lots of snow and
yeah, probably a little bit.
Adverse weather conditions from time to time, much more than down here in Raleigh.
Yeah.
But he had to make a decision whether to keep his landscaping outsourced or making the decision to bring it in, and they had an actual insurance risk at one point due to a slip and fall that really made that decision pretty clear for him. He's a big advocate of bringing it in-house, just because then his team is familiar, they have the top priority, we're not waiting for them to come because they have a million other places that they need to stop in between, and it's at a lower cost for them. So for them it was a no-brainer, and they were able to make sure that their residents had a safe environment if they chose to walk out while it was snowing, or even after, if they chose to brave the elements. But he had some staggering statistics too on just how many hours they would spend, and it just never made sense for them to take it back outside. And then at Menno Place, they have aging buildings, and it's interesting. You can look at the safety and risk mitigation side of this, but then we can also talk about the aesthetics and the fact that landscaping is a huge win for a community with aging buildings. I mean, they're doing everything they can to keep those buildings up, of course, but landscaping goes a long way. So he's a big proponent of having that team dedicated to that as well. Both communities, do a lot to make sure that their residents' aesthetic, experience is kept up too. Bass had a great story to tell about. There was a resident that was in their skilled nursing area, and she religiously watched out the window who was coming in and out of the door right out there. And over time, a tree grew up into it. And so it was pretty cool. The mom of the resident came to Baz and said, she really wants that limb taken down. Can you do that for me? And of course he did it, right then and there on the same day. And just little things like that. He made the comment, sometimes it's 99% of their day is looking out that window. So how can we make that a good experience for them? So I thought that was pretty powerful, gave me some goosebumps.
Yeah. I love that story, and it makes you, it's more in tune with the human element. The technology helps, and that's where we're making the link, but at the end it comes down to residents. How can we positively impact them? And I think what's daunting for some of the sites that we talk to is, if I bring this in-house, how can I keep track of all those guys, what their schedules are, the resident request that comes in?
Right.
So what we ultimately set out, at least for our part, how we can help sites with that is go beyond mixing in, different requests from different departments and have a standalone module or application that would be for landscaping.
Right.
I've talked to a couple of sites where these guys were using mobile devices. They could pull up their schedules and see everything that they had. But similar to maintenance, without sort of a system to track some of this and have things like seasonal schedules and say, hey, this is when we have to, blow off the parking lots or do things like that. It can get lost, certain items, particularly like you mentioned. A family member could mention, hey, can you guys take care of that? And it might get forgotten and not out of any ill intent or anything, just as not having a system to keep up with it. So if you can see your screen now, again, if you're used to this program, you can have different modules set up. Landscaping can have its own area where you can set up different schedules, have different maintenance set up, be able to track all the different items that keep up the aesthetics of the community in the same way that maintenance has tasks and schedules to keep up with, but without sort of smashing them into one module and having it kind of get the water stirred up a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way, both of the communities that we were working with too, they have a big focus on outdoor activity and, making sure that their residents are out and experiencing nature more. So, between gardening and lawn bowling, I know Baz does a lot with his community in that regard. And then Dale put a camera out for all of his residents to watch ducks that come, each year and hatch their little ones. So that was a big hit too. So just, again, having a dedicated place to make sure that all of that happens and that, the residents are having a seamless experience. So pretty exciting stuff.
I like that. I want to get the webcam link to see some of that. So, but again, again, that's such an impact on what's their day-to-day,
sure.
How things look. I think there's a lot to be said there.
Sure, for sure.
Okay. Well, moving on, we'll hit on some housekeeping here. Obviously, this is most all sites that are up and running. There's a lot of responsibilities on having good ways to keep up with all the housekeeping tasks, the day in, day outs. Lindsay, you want to talk about some of the things that came up in your discussions there as relates to interactions from the housekeeping team? Definitely.
So this was a big topic. This one we spent a lot of time, in our conversations prior to our last webinar and on that webinar itself. As everybody knows, this is a huge part of what your team is responsible for on a day-to-day basis, and a huge initiative that both of our panelists had as high priorities. Baz's he had a paper process prior to utilizing the Works Hub for housekeeping, and knew that just was no good, which I think everybody can see the problems with that. We're losing slips of paper, kind of like our sticky notes before. Nothing is really getting captured or tracked as it's supposed to be, and things fall through the cracks. So he saw it as a huge opportunity to leverage our mobile application for that, right? Our daily tasks happen. We need to make sure those things are happening. We need to make sure that we have that information tracked. And so that was, a huge thing for him to do, and he saw a huge productivity gain from that as well. Because everything was now organized, it was well documented. If there were issues that came up, you had that, that information to use. Along with that, he was trying to understand how his housekeepers were doing their jobs on a day-to-day basis. So he put together some audits just to make sure they had some standardization, that the level of service they were providing was top-notch. And he really, without having something to do this before, kind of used this as a test case. And he actually found that his housekeepers were a little complacent, right? We weren't standardized. And so he made sure that that they were able to, influence their behavior for the better. And they have the highest resident satisfaction levels that they've had, in a very, very long time. They've been running housekeeping for several years now, so they've seen a sustained level of service, but it's pretty cool to see how you can really transform that from what it was to obviously what it is now. As part of that, related but kind of, is the infection control piece that he also uses WorksHub for. So he has, templates and things designed to help them handle outbreaks, whatever those might be, if it is Legionella or it's a respiratory infection or something like that. He feels confident, right, that the processes that they've put in place not only, help it just helps cut down the length, I guess, of those outbreaks. So he was very confident in that and thinks that the WorksHub was huge for that.
Yeah, and it's still amazing to me that out there, I think there's a lot of programs that handle maintenance, and some of them, better than others. But with housekeeping, there's still a lag where I think there's still a lot of people that are on kind of the pen and paper and whiteboards and things. And
definitely,
that's a difficult thing to manage if you have that many housekeepers. So we took a lot of feedback from clients and sort of built in some tools so that as a community, you're able to house all of those schedules in sort of one place. So to your point, what we would consider almost standardization, or here are the things that we're going to do today, tomorrow. What are the steps and procedures that we're going to put into a solution so that it's not, this is how one person does it, this is how another person does it. This is the Sycamore Place way. So you can set and standardize these within the solution itself. As Lindsay mentioned, one of the other sites, or a lot of sites for that matter, are allowing their housekeepers to use mobile devices. So instead of little black books or other forms, they can have all this on a device and say, here's exactly what I'm supposed to do. I can check everything is completed. And really start to move away from paper, which I think is a natural progression, even if it's just for like supervisors that need to know where their staff is at any given time. A really powerful tool.
Definitely.
And so that's even just from a scheduling perspective, and you talk really in depth in terms of if we're going to have this set up on mobile devices and do some quality assurance. We could actually have that set right with the mobile device. That's kind of the screen if you're seeing it now. Those time-consuming steps that go into collecting these results by hand, we can start to streamline this, and they could be filled up with your steps and procedures to mirror those. They could be around infection control and saying, did this get cleaned or did we accomplish this? So if we're really talking about impacting the resident, let's see, are we holding up to our standards and being able to kind of track some of this within the software without it becoming really time-consuming?
Yeah. It's kind of that missing piece, I think. People move to a paperless process for their housekeeping. That's usually that step one, right? And then this is just that next step that helps you hold your team accountable and make sure that we are meeting those resident expectations and promises that we've made.
And that's it. And I think it's something we say around here a lot is if you're not tracking it, you can't manage it. So it's a matter of if we've gone through and done some tracking as far as what people have done in terms of where are the most frequent things popping up, we can side by side rate housekeepers that might need a little bit of help. We can find out what our most common things that we're running into are and have some opportunities to really elevate the services of our team members. Again, things that we don't want to take up too much time for our team members by mining through spreadsheets or stacks of paper. Just let the system do some of the work for you.
Yeah, rolls it up really nicely and makes it a lot more efficient process. And all of that information is right at your fingertips, which is nice.
So some good food for thought on the housekeeping side. You look for ways to kind of improve those teams. Jumping ahead here, next thing I think that you guys really kind of got into was really specifically targeting on some of the resident services there and kind of some of the touch points that I think a lot of sites are looking for ways to enhance. So you want to talk a little bit about kind of what came up in your conversations there? Sure,
yeah. This was an interesting topic. Baz is really creative with how he utilizes the Works Hub, and we have kind of worked alongside of him in that. And it's something that all of you have the opportunity to do, which is create a custom application. That's what he did in this. Well, it was his idea, and it was his resident services coordinator that really were looking to fit something else into the Works Hub, so they weren't using something else outside of the Works Hub as their main focus or their main application. So they did. They created this custom app, and the life enrichment coordinators are able to track a new resident's assimilation to the community, right? So how are they adjusting? Do they feel comfortable? Did somebody greet them? The little things that we don't really think about. There's so much effort that goes into getting that resident there, right, and making sure that everything is set up, how they needed it to be. But sometimes that's where it stops, right? And we hope that they find their way in where they are in their new surroundings. But they just felt like they wanted to, which makes total sense to me, right, kind of hold their hand through that process and make sure that their new home is just as comfortable, if not more comfortable, than where they came from. So, we talked about surveys a second ago, but this was another unique way to use them, right, because they could understand, if their room was ready, if they were offered a tour when they first came on campus, have you been introduced to other residents, and then they can kind of pivot and change and do what they need to do, to make sure that experience is top-notch for them. And it's such a creative way to use the Works Hub. I don't know that, I would have ever thought of it before, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow, why haven't we done this before now? So kudos to him and his team, for kind of being creative and getting out there and doing something different with the Works Hub. But
I love them. I love them for that. But I think some of our best ideas come from clients that thought more outside the box, and I work with them on that. And they were, like we looked at projects before, instead of being, here's 5 steps to complete this turnover, it was, let's check in with the resident after 1 week. Let's check with them after 3 weeks. Let's check after 5. And I was like, this is a fantastic idea. So I love the creativity when they brought that, and I think they've been up and running with that for at least a year. So it's great.
It's been a while now. The stories that come out of it are it's pretty cool.
I like it.
I love it. One thing that if we're changing, areas a little bit, something that Dale leverages, which I know you mentioned before, is the maintenance secretary, maintenance assistant. He has a maintenance coordinator, Laura Todd, and she's phenomenal. I mean, and having somebody in that position, for communities that do have that, I think they really see the benefit there, right? Somebody that can, field those requests from residents, make sure that those things get taken care of in a quick and effective way, right? And making sure that their residents are served well. So I work a lot with Laura. She is, she's really good at what she does, and I know there are a lot of other maintenance coordinators that I work with too that they are your gurus. They are your Works Hub or your process gurus. They're working with the team. They're working with the facilities directors, just to make sure that everything top to bottom is being taken care of with the resident in mind. So pretty cool.
It's good people to have on your side, and where we can equip them with some tools to say, look, we want to have a good pulse on what our resident experiences are. We can start to do some really nice things. And one of the examples that we've kind of talked a little bit about was sort of taking some survey or taking some pulses of how our folks are doing, how our residents are doing.
Right.
So you can start to automate some of this. So let's send some surveys back to residents and then say, if you could, please answer maybe a few questions. And this can help to give you some valuable data back. So I've got an example pulled up, but Again, this can replace sort of a paper process where maybe people don't respond back, and maybe once you get the paper, you got to collate it and pull results from it. This is maybe an opportunity where you can get that information directly from the residents. You can use this to help coach up your teams and find ways to kind of get the most return on investment or the most amount of change based on what your survey results are. So some valuable info there. You can run that into some reports and start to look at how your team is actually performing, resident satisfaction broken up by workers, by certain items there. The other big one that we see that I think is of interest for a lot of people is what are your turnaround times for those residents? So having an efficient way to start to measure some of that and look at, based in the last month, based in the last quarter, how quickly does the time from a request is made to the time it's completed, how long is that? Are we trending in the right direction? So no, it's, again, maybe a valuable data point, but maybe hard for some people to be able to, find a way to pull it out. That was something that we, easily built in so that you can say, based on our data, based on what we have, here's our average turnaround times, so let's make adjustments accordingly.
Right. Yeah. It's all about good data in, good data out, right? I mean, that's the only way to make sure that we can make decisions off of this and affect real change in the community, because we have to have the data to back it up. So it's a really good tie-in there.
Yeah, and then I pulled this up just for maintenance, but this could be any number of the housekeeping teams, your landscaping. So at least kind of being able to pull the data can be helpful for a lot of folks.
Sure.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to our last topic here, which is that security piece. So this was one that I know, working here for several years, this is one that a lot of sites, a lot of communities were really like, hey, we like what you can do on maintenance. That's great, but as far as security goes, we really have a need here, and that can go into many different kind of facets. I know this came up with you guys as you kind of went through what kind of is entailed within security team responsibilities. You want to share a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. This is a huge focus for both communities, of course. The more technologically advanced things are, the more, the evolution of things become, it's a huge focus. And Dale was a huge collaborator with us on creating the security app and, providing feedback. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll give Kyle all the credit there. But he was, he always said that everything out on the market was a little too robust for what they need, or conversely, not enough.
Right.
And he had his security supervisor, I think that's what his title is, used to be a police officer and had, very detailed incident reporting and things. And so he had a lot of thoughts, and he was able to help us a great deal on that. So, huge priority for them. And something that I thought he said that was interesting was that it's, part of the package. It's part of what they are buying when they come to our community. We're not just here to provide them a home. We're here to keep them safe. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it now. But, if I were in a community like this, or my grandparents or my parents or whoever it is, right, you want to make sure that they're taken care of. And this is a big part of that for them and for hopefully all of you, I think. So not only that, but, educating the residents. I think Bass had a good story about, they are across from a hospital. You can't guarantee who might walk on the grounds or not, and being in a little bit more of an urban environment. So he had to make sure that, the residents knew not to just let anybody in, which also you don't think about, right? We all want to be friendly. We all want to help everybody get in if they need to. And he had to kind of help them understand that if they don't know who they are, they, should be going through concierge or going through, the proper channels to make sure that they get in. So and reporting anything that was unusual to make sure that those things got taken care of. So definitely some good stuff there.
Yeah, a huge part of what a lot of campuses have to contend with now. So again, some of the task begins, well, if we're going to use some technology to help manage that, where do we even start? For a lot of teams, again, this is more paper-based. We developed a security app, released it, would have been towards the end of last year, based on, again, great feedback from some of the clients that we have.
Yeah, definitely.
So based on that, we were able to incorporate and say, most teams are kind of doing security checks or rounds. So let's build those in as reminders. These are things that we're going to check on a certain time basis, once a day, 3 times a day, and go and hit certain security checkpoints. And I think the big thing was, if we can do this, that's great. It has to be kind of within what we would consider a mobile device. So flashing back and leveraging the power of mobile, we can have those security checkpoints sort of built in, so we could actually go in, scan certain points. We're looking for particular issues. It might be, is there, things that need to get tended to? Are there cars that are parked in the lot overnight? Whatever those items are, because we already have mobile technology built for maintenance and housekeeping and some of these other teams, we can actually go through, leverage some of this, do some barcode scanning in some cases to verify we were at the particular places. We can create new incidents if we see suspicious activities. But I think it should bring some sort of some technology for what a lot of people is sort of a manual process, which does become difficult to go through and go back retroactively and look at some of this. So you can use the mobile devices to your advantage. You can create incident reports, and then ultimately all this information lives on your dashboard. You can go through, you can see what's happened. Again, all this is in an effort to keep these communities safe, and really just having a way to do it in a way that makes sense for a lot of the communities that we work with. And again, that could be for incident reporting. This could be for your rounds, running daily log reports. So there's many different applications within this. So again, we're going to continue to build on this. But again, part of it is potentially, again, getting feedback from clients saying, this is the kind of things that we want to be able to keep up with.
Definitely.
So we take that all to heart.
Definitely.
So I think those are all the categories that had come up before. Did we miss anything else?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
All right. Well, with that, we'll start to kind of come down the wire here. But
definitely.
I think in terms of the workshop as a whole, you've seen hopefully some of the different modules that we offer. There's probably some more questions hopefully that some folks have, so we're happy to sort of answer those.
Yeah. So I think the big takeaway here for everybody is just, whether you're using the Works Hub or any other CMMS provider for your operations, just making sure that you leverage the technology that you do have. With the Works Hub specifically, we have a lot of tie-ins to your operations team and make sure that everything is part of one centralized hub, right? Fancy that, the Works Hub. But, it's a huge passion of ours, right, to make sure that, the resident experience is seamless. And that's where all of these applications have kind of been born out of, the need of the communities that we do serve. So take a look at the wheel. I know that McKinley has a poll question coming up here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pop this poll question up, but Patrick, as you said, if you'd like to know more about the Works Hub, any of the applications, if you're a current client but want more training or want to learn about a custom app or some of the other things that our clients are doing and we can help you with, please let us know. And Patrick, as you said, we do have a couple questions.
Oh, great.
The first one, we have a current client who would like to know how that you access the resident info screen and how they can start to kind of store some of that in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the initial sort of processes is sort of building your locations for your site, but then on top of that, layered on would be adding residents to those locations. If I open this up, will this pop up? No, never mind. I'll just talk about it. So
you can open it up.
Okay. So if you're seeing your screen, what you can do, I think I had it set up as a search. So one of them would be locations and residents.
Go ahead and start sharing your screen again.
Oh, sorry. So let me try that one more time. Okay. So if you're looking at your screen, there's a location or a search area for locations and residents. So I just had one of them pulled up. So you can work with your client services folks to kind of build some of this in. But I think just over time with our account, I built in some kind of mock data. So yeah, this would just be tied to your individual location. There's a second tab for resident info. You can start to house some of that. And I think that's something you just build onto over time. You don't have to tackle all of it in one fell swoop. Start to get some little tidbits here and there and start to put them in, and it'll start to add up over time.
Sure. Someone else would like to know, can you show us how to make a repeating work order? We have Tai Chi every Saturday and would like to put it in as a repeating event.
Oh, interesting. Tai Chi, I like it. So within this, there's a couple different options. One module that we didn't talk about was the room bookings application, where you could actually set up those Tai Chi classes in specific locations and block those areas out. So that's, we can get you more information on that. But on a regular basis, you could set up a new scheduled work order in the top right section here. And then you could go through, fill out some basic criteria, assuming that the Tai Chi is in the same location every time. You could set that up to recur, and then you're going to say how often that's going to pop up here in the center section. Any details, tasks, things that might need to happen as far as setup or tear down, things like that around the class. There's probably a couple different ways to do it, but again, the great part is you can always call in, talk to our client services folks. They'll walk you through to make sure that it's kind of set up the way that you're imagining it.
Yeah.
Awesome. The last question we have, and please again feel free to submit any as we're still going along here, is do all of these work together? So for example, if there's an incident that happens in security, how does that get resolved, and do our applications work together?
Yeah, great question. I love that because it's they shouldn't be totally separate programs that don't sort of talk to each other. So within a lot of these, they're sharing a back-end database. So for instance, the security one's a good example. Another one is if you had a request in one department but it needed to get rerouted to another, there's going to be a reroute option right inside of these that you can actually send these to other departments. So that way we're not totally siloed off from other departments, only where it makes sense, but there is some sort of sharing of information that goes along with that.
Yeah, and related to that, your technicians, your housekeepers, they don't need to see everything, but maybe your supervisors or your managers or whoever it is, you can also kind of separate out who needs to see what. So it's great that it is visible across the board, what you see there as far as the tabs across the top, maintenance, housekeeping. You can have as many of those as you want, but you don't have to give everybody access to everything. So you can make it as, separate or together as you need. Yeah,
in some cases it makes sense. In some cases it's you want to keep it a little bit separated. As going back to that security example, one of the things I like is within the security app, you could actually generate requests that funnel to other departments within that. So if you, for instance, were walking the grounds and you needed to actually generate a request and say, this is not going to be like an incident, but I'd like to report that, there's a gate that's broken that needs to get fixed, or there's a door that's not latching, they can generate requests within the security piece to go to the appropriate department. So.
Yeah, that goes back to what Dale was talking about last time too, just with, interdepartmental needs, right? Just because security sees it doesn't mean they're going to be the ones that can fix it. So how do we get that to the right people? So yeah,
absolutely.
Great.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Somebody actually just, I think maybe when you were up in the software, they saw WorksIQ. They want to know, what is WorksIQ?
It's great. So we're not slipping anything past anyone today, so that's good. So WorksIQ is more of what we would call kind of our business intelligence piece. For those that are larger sites or multi-site providers, what you can do is start to roll that data up and start to look at it more of at a high level. So not just the site level reporting. I'll see if I can't pop one of these up real quick. So what you can do is compare site versus site, be able to compare what those analytics look like, average response time site versus site. What are your costs per site to kind of analyze those. And in some cases actually do things like benchmarking. Because we have over 1,000 clients in our database, we've kind of made it possible for you to start to compare yourself versus other sites. So if you want to see what your average response time is versus sites your size, those are analytics you can start to look at, which I think kind of takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, makes it more than just, a corporate reporting tool. If you are a site by site, you have one, you only have one community, it's equally as valuable at that rate, because we do leverage the power of the database, all of you in your communities, and the work that you're doing to give you those benchmarks, which is a pretty powerful and unique tool there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unique because there's just so much data that we can use to help you to compare that if you know where you stand versus everyone else, it helps you to know are you doing, or could you be doing more billings, or could you be do you need to hire more staff because you're kind of falling behind national averages.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for joining us and for sharing this awesome information with us, and thank you to everyone on the call for joining in. If you didn't get a chance to answer the poll question, or you didn't get a chance to type it in there, please get in touch and reach out to us. We're more than happy, as you can see, to have these conversations with you so that we can make your community a better place for your residents. So we appreciate it and hope you'll join us next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Please stand by.